Welcome to the Love Lab Podcast, a safe place to get real about sex. Whether you're a man, woman, single, or couple, this is the show for you.
We are your hosts, Kevin Anthony and Céline Remy, and we are here to guide you to go from good to amazing in the bedroom and beyond.
All right, welcome back to the Love Lab Podcast. This is episode 120, and it is How to Make Love Like a Porn Star or Not, with special guest Erik Everhard. Okay, so we've talked about porn a bit on the show. We've had a couple of different episodes with sort of different variations on that theme. But one thing that we've never done is had an actual porn star on the show. So I think this is going to be really exciting for a couple of reasons. One, first of all, I mean, it's just a fascinating conversation to have with somebody that had the types of experiences that Erik has had. So that's fascinating in and of itself. But the other thing that comes out of it, and this is going to be the sort of bulk of what we talk about, I think, on the show today, is how his experience relates to real life. So everybody looks at porn stars and they're like, oh yeah, man. I know every 20-something male thinks it would be his ultimate dream to be able to be a porn star. So we're going to see just how much that dream matches up to real life experience.
So I'm very excited about diving into this subject. And before we introduce our guest, let's give a big shout out to our sponsors, Power and Mastery. So if you want to join the secret club of men who are great in bed, then check out Power and Mastery at powerandmastery.com. It is the most complete sexual mastery training for men. Whether you want to have harder erections, last longer, or increase your sexual skills, there is something for you at powerandmastery.com. So today we have Erik Everhard. Yes, I'm not going to make jokes about his name.
Not
and
yet.
It is a stage name. Anyway, he is one of the top paid and most recognized performers in adult film of the last 2 decades. He has won numerous male performer awards and been enshrined in the Hall of Fame of the AVN and XRCO organizations. In 2010, he embarked on a transformational journey studying NLP at one of the top institutions in America. Since then, he has dedicated his time and effort to helping men by teaching them elite level sexual skills to have confidence with women in the bedroom. Yeah, wonderful. Welcome, Erik. We are excited to have you on the Love Lab podcast.
I'm excited to be here.
All right, we are just going to dive right in. So, okay, one of the things that I really love about this, and we'll get to Erik's book when we get to the very end, but we had an opportunity to look through it. And one of the things that we really liked about it is so similar. The types of things you teach are so similar to the types of stuff that we teach. But you arrived at those things from a very different perspective in life than we arrived at them. But I think it's amazing that we're doing kind of the similar things. And so what I wanted to start with is just sort of establishing your credentials in this area here.
In the fucking arena.
Establishing my credentials.
All right. So the first question is, how many women have you actually had sex with?
5,000 plus or minus 500 ballpark.
Okay. So yeah, I remember. So this is going to be fun. I did some math here, right? I don't know how old you are, but I'm 46 years old, okay? And we've told the audience that many times, so I don't mind saying it anymore. I did a little math based on 4,000 women because I thought your number was somewhere more around 4,000, right? So at 46 years old, let's say I've been sexually active for about 30 years, right? 4,000 women, that's 133.33 women a year. All right. So, which then becomes one woman every 3 days, different woman. That's some pretty impressive numbers. So what I'm trying to figure out is you're probably, I don't think you're much older than I am if you are. How in the world do you have sex with 5,000 plus women in your lifetime?
Well, you do a lot of movies with a lot of women. Like the most amount of women that I ever slept with in one movie was 101.
In one movie?
One movie. Hey, you can look it up.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
I probably will.
That was a long day. It was a long day at the office. Let's put it that way.
Needed some ice packs after that one, huh?
Oh man. I literally had like a layer of skin that was like missing from my dick after that.
Wow. And you were hard for each one of them?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Impressive.
With a different
Hence the name.
condom for every girl too.
Wow.
I actually had my own condom PA that day.
That's how you know you've made it in the porn business. You've got your own personal assistant that is in charge of nothing but your condoms.
But it's true. It's a true story. I mean, he was just there every time because, you know, this was, I did the movie back in, I want to say 2000. And that was a couple of years removed from when they had an AIDS scare in the business. And there were certain companies that decided they were only going to shoot with condoms. And this was one of those companies. It was a very, very big company. It was a Vivid Video at the time they shot it. And so they required, it was like, okay, well, we're doing this gigantic reverse gangbang. It's you and 101 girls. And there has to be a new condom for every girl. So, you know, the second that condom is starting to feel good, you're like, oh yeah, this ain't so bad. It's like, off, next. Okay. And then you're like, condom PA, give me the condom, you know, and he was pre-torn. It was like fast, you know. I didn't have to fuck with nothing.
You had enough other fucking to take care of.
I did, yes.
Okay, so I think that we have established your credentials. If somebody, okay, even if you were absolutely terrible in bed, if you've had sex with 5,000 women, by the time you get that far along, you had to have learned something. Mm-hmm. You had to have picked up some skills.
You would hope.
Uh-huh.
The sad thing is, you know, there's probably somebody out there that could go through that experiment and learn nothing. But I mean, if you're going through life with conscious awareness and your eyes are open, you should be learning things. You should be picking things up as you go along.
Absolutely.
So I want to take it back to the beginning, and I want to know, because I know there is a story, how did you come up with your name, Erik Everhard?
Well, the name actually was given to me by a friend of mine. So at the time, I was working and living in Vancouver, and I worked at a local gym. And this was a super... every version avatar of Meathead belonged there. So it was, we had bodybuilders, we had powerlifters, we had cops, we had bikers, we had drug dealers, and a very small smattering of girls. You know, and they worked out, you know, because this was not a place where, you know, just grandma and, you know, someone that wanted to do some aerobics went to. No, this was a hardcore gym. And I used to work there. I worked the counter. I sold memberships. And so when it all came out that I had, you know, done my first porno scene, et cetera, we were all sitting around at the juice bar, and they're like, "Well, you got to have a name, right?" I'm like, haven't thought that far ahead, right? And my buddy Jeff, who was the resident drug dealer of the gym, he just out of nowhere, he was like, just came out of his mouth. He goes, "Erik Everhard." He goes, "Because I've seen your movies and your dick was always hard. It was pointed to the ceiling." And he's like, "And you need alliteration, you know, because it's got to be like Jenna Jameson, Vince Voyer." He goes, "Erik Everhard." And then he goes, "Oh, and you got blonde hair, so you look Nordic, so you got to spell it with a K." And literally, no shit, literally. And all of us, it's like silence, right? We're just like, "Jeff, that's fucking genius." That was it. There was like, we're like, there's no question. That's
Never
it.
looked back.
Well, I agree. That was genius. Okay,
and what's funny is, you know, throughout my whole career, I was lucky because, well, first of all, everybody would mostly refer to me by my last name. So if people were talking about me in circles, it was always Everhard, right? But I was the only one. So, you know, I mean, there was 1,000,001 Steels, 1,000,001, you know, XYZ names. But mine, no, there was only one, and they knew who you were talking about, and that was it. So from that perspective, just from pure marketing, Jeff was a genius.
And apparently you lived up to your name.
I did. It was even changed into a few different versions. I remember this was a business trip we were on in Dominican Republic. We were shooting a porno in Dominican Republic, and it was very boots on the ground kind of shooting, because the director, he would fly in. There was no infrastructure, so he had no girls, he had no agencies, he had nothing. He just went there because he liked to surf. And he's like, I'll put together a movie. So after about 3 weeks, he manages to get everybody together, calls us, flies us in, and we start working. So we have to go get tested there, right? Because we're getting all the girls tested, and so we have to get tested too, so that they can see my test is in their language and at their clinic. And we have this nurse, and so she asks, like, what's his name, right? And our friend, I believe his name was Gustavo, of course he's got a super Spanish accent, so he's like, Everhard. She's like, ¿Qué? Everhard. ¿Qué? Right? And then he just throws it out there. He goes, Enrique siempre duro. Ah, sí. and then after that, like, for years, I mean, to this day, sometimes people would be like, hey, siempre duro.
That's pretty funny. Okay, that question really was just for entertainment purposes, not totally relevant to the topic we're discussing, but hysterical nonetheless.
We're going to laugh. So we went through your book, and the story of like how you got into porn was kind of fun. And like Kevin mentioned earlier, it is a lot of guys like fantasy. Oh, if only I could be a porn star, or better, if only I could sleep with a porn star, because they think it's going to make a difference, not understanding that they are the one making the difference. But we will come back to that later.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about how you got into porn first.
Well, where would you like me to start?
Well, what was it? A day on April? I wrote it down somewhere.
It was April 17th. So, well, I'll try and give you the Cliff Notes version. Basically, I was a student at a massage therapy college, and I was going to school there at the time. And on lunch break, I came across this ad in the newspaper, and they were looking for couples and girls to do porno movie. And I used to have this ex-girlfriend who, we would watch porno movies sometimes together, and she would joke. She'd be like, oh yeah, you could do that. I'm like, yeah, thanks, sweetheart, right? Because anybody that you're dating is going to say you are wonderful, even if it's not the case, right? So I didn't really think too much about it, but then when I saw the ad, I was like, wait a second, look, she said I'd always be good at that, and that's what put the thought in my mind. So I called them up, and of course they basically hung up on me, which I understand now after, having done this job for over 22 years. Most guys cannot do it. Like, just matter of factly, like, most guys don't have the entire combination of things that's required, which is you have to be, number one, you have to be extremely strong mentally. You have to have the ability to overcome your anxiety, block out everything in your head, really almost have a meditative state in your mind. And then you have to be blessed with the equipment as well, right? And then you need to put that all together with total body mastery. So it's, it's a lot of things, and just most guys just don't have those qualities together. And no production company is going to wait for you to magically get your shit together. They have money riding on it. Like, when you go to, especially any of these big professional gigs, they have a lot of money riding on the day. So a lot of times you'll have people online that will, they'll troll, they'll complain, they'll say, whoa, why is it the same guys over and over? I'm like, dude, step up, come on, let's see you do it, right? Because I've watched hundreds of guys at this point absolutely fail.
So that brings it to the next question, or like, okay, so I remembered in your book you said you called them, they said no, and then finally you got in, and you were the only guy who passed the audition. So that's kind of like proving the point, right? That ultimately you came up for a photo shoot, and then it turned out that you were just put on film and be like, hey, fuck this girl, right?
Well, yeah, that was the thing. Is I kept badgering them. One day they said, okay, come by and we'll take some Polaroids of you and see if you have the equipment, right? Like, so I go down to this seedy area in Vancouver, and I knock on this metal door, and the guy opens it, and he's like, he looks at me and goes, are you Mitch? I'm like, yeah. And he looks me just straight in the eyes, and he just says, just deadpan, oh, can you fuck this girl for us right now? And I mean, I was so shocked, right? Like my mouth must have just been hanging open, and I just let out like the meekest little like, yep, sure. And yeah, and it was this girl that they had shot before, and she just happened to be hanging out at their studio. So she was hanging out there, I was there, and they said, well, screw it, let's see if the kid can actually do it. And I did. There was no problem. And then I remember, so I got the hard on, no problem, doing the scene. And then I remember they came in at some point, and this was kind of funny because they said, anytime in the next 10 minutes, if you could produce a cum shot, right? That would be fabulous, right? Like, I mean, the standards that we have, in professional porno, it's like they look at you, they're like, hey man, like you got a minute, like get it together, right? Oh yeah, you should be able to produce one in about a minute, generally speaking. So yeah, I was like, oh, okay. Like I wasn't even thinking anything about it because there was no point that I thought this is going to be a career. I thought I'm just collecting a really cool story. So yeah, so it was easy. Boom, cum shot. I was like, okay, that's great. And then they gave me some money. I thought, oh Jesus, right? I got paid for this too. I'm like, this story got better, right? And that was it. And then I just went home and I was like, man, that's going to be a great story to tell the grandkids. Like, hey, grandpa did a porno once. And then it was about 3 days later, I get this phone call. And, I don't know who it is. So I answer it. And it's the guys from the studio. And they're like, hey, can you come by and do that again? I was like, okay. And that was what started me down that path. And then eventually, the editor, he confided in me. He goes, look, the owner will never tell you this, but you're really good at this. You should think about going down to LA. You could probably make some serious money. And I was just so naive. I was like, what? There's money in this? No clue. I was 21, right?
Okay, so now I really want to see like what happened, because so many men have expectations like, okay, if you get into porn, like being a porn star, it's going to be so great. Did being a porn star like live up to the expectations in your head?
Well, I would say generally yes. I mean, I didn't have any expectations in my head, right? Like I had no idea how the business worked. I mean, I had seen some pornos, but there was no, at that time, maybe now it's different because now you have so much access because of social media. You have, different groups that'll put together documentaries on Netflix, right? And so you have all these different groups that are trying to portray what the business is, which most of them do a piss poor job. But still, I mean, they're all trying to give their angle, right? Like this side will say, well, porno's bad, so we're going to, find the worst of the worst people and put them on camera and say, this is what it's about, right? And then these other people will say, oh, porno is the greatest thing ever, and we're going to find the absolute best people that have been most successful and put them on camera. The truth's always somewhere in the middle. So, but back then, I mean, there was no access to anybody. Like you had no knowledge of anything. I mean, when I, for example, had to get in touch to start my career, I put together a VHS reel of scenes that I had done, and I mailed it out to all the companies. I found their addresses in the back of the AVN magazine, and I sent out these packages with VHS tapes. I mean, there was no internet, there was no email, there was no, it's like, I mean, this was a process, right? Like, so, like I said, I mean, there was just, I mean, I had no idea because how would you know, right? It was
Yeah.
so underground, and even back then, most of the companies were mom and pop companies, which is not the case today. Now you have these huge monolith, companies that are gigantic. But back then, they were mostly mom and pop operations.
So, I think that, at least from the guy's perspective, I don't know about the women's perspective, but I think from the guy's perspective, when they think about being a porn star, they think, I'm going to get to have sex with all these hot women and it's going to be awesome. The sex is going to be amazing. Like, oh my God, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. And I think our question about expectations was starting to sort of scratch at that. And that leads us into our next question too, which is that, yeah, I mean, anybody that is actually really good at sex can look at porn sex and understand that, one, that's not real, and two, some of that stuff just doesn't actually really work in a sense. Like, maybe it's not necessarily stimulating her the right way, but it looks good on camera, right? So I think, well, I don't know, maybe not, but I would say that most people would look at that and understand that. But that's different than from the fantasy that people have in their minds about what it's going to be like. And so the question is, how is porn sex, from your experience, different from real sex? Because now you're teaching people how to have real sex, right? And some of that probably comes from that experience.
Well, but here's the thing where you kind of have to unpack that, because it is all real sex, and this is where I think there becomes this disconnect for people, right? Because they'll watch what I do and they think it's real, because it actually is. But they should be able to discern, like, if they watch a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger and he mows down 90 people with a gun with one hand and doesn't have a scratch on him, like, they can objectively look at that and go, it's probably not real. It's probably not real, right? The problem that you have with porno is the fact that they're looking at what I'm doing and there's no CGI. What I am doing is legitimately happening. So, it's, in some ways, it's like watching sports on TV. You're watching something for this larger than life, unrealistic expectation, but is legitimately happening. I mean, those football players are really catching the football. They're really running through people, and they're really breaking bones. But it's like, well, they break something. Let's just cart them off, and we're going to pretend it didn't happen. Right? And so I don't know if that's a good analogy, but porno is the same way, in the sense of, we're doing things that are difficult, and you wouldn't necessarily say that all of it feels great, is amazing, etc., because it's visual, and we're putting on a visual performance at the end of the day, because that is what the buying clientele wants. They're coming there for this visual stimuli. And so sometimes I think they're missing the point that just because it's visually stimulating does not mean that it feels good. And that's where you get that divergence.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point that I was getting at, which is that when you watch it and you see some of the things that they're doing, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's necessarily a great technique for her or for him, or that it necessarily feels that good. It might just be that it happened to be a really good camera angle and it looked really good. Now, that's great for visual stimulation, but and I know a lot of guys do this, if they're watching porn trying to pick up tips on how to be good in bed, it's entirely possible that they're going to learn some stuff that isn't really right.
Oh yeah, but that's what I mean. I mean, that's also the thing where it's like, well, you shouldn't watch Schwarzenegger to learn how to fire a gun. I mean, come on, the guy's firing like an M60 with one hand. Okay, it's like,
I would like to think that people are smart enough. Like, obviously, when you see Schwarzenegger in that, well, you know what? All right, let me just say this: as somebody who does shoot guns, quite a bit. I hope I don't offend anybody in this audience, but I'm quite good with weapons. I look at Schwarzenegger and I go, this is preposterous. Like there's no shred of reality. But I have conversations with people all the time who are not gun people who have no idea that that's not real.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
So it's very possible it's the same thing. I mean, I can, where I'm at, I objectively look at everything and I'm like, God, how does anybody think that this feels good, right? I'm a fucking athlete right now, and but like as you said, they might be looking and be like, wow, that's really cool. I want to do that, right?
Yeah, and that's
So,
kind of the point is that I'm not sure that everybody is capable of understanding that, which is why we just wanted to make that point. I would like to think they are, but then again, my experience in other realms of life shows that may not be the case.
So I want to bring in some women's perspective, but before that, I want to do a quick break to invite any couples listening today. If you are a committed couple who is stuck in a rut and just going through the daily motions instead of connecting the way you used to, and you're tired of stale mechanical sex that lacks spontaneity and fun, and you don't want to live a life of average, then Kevin and I would like to invite you to join our highly sexed Power Couple Platinum program. Give us 90 days and we will help you bring the passion back between the sheets and be synced up sexually so that you can thrive with more purpose and passion in life. So go to CelineRemy.com/passion. And know the tips we are going to give you are not Pornstar tips, but yes, anyway. So I'm not a fan of porno movies. To be truly honest, I was having this discussion with Kevin. I was like, if I've watched 5 of them in my entire life, that's probably a lot. And it's mostly because I was having to do some research on things to figure out what people liked and want. So I'm in no way an expert.
I've seen more than that.
I'm sure you have. And we know Erik has been in more than that.
Yeah. Well, I've done at least 2. But that's also, that illustrates the point too. I mean, when you're creating them, you're creating it solely for a male audience. Like we all know that going in. Like nobody has any illusions of who the buying clientele is. So.
Yeah. And so what's fascinating is I think as a woman, for me, I'm watching this and I'm like, oh, come on, this is so unrealistic that it can't even turn me on, because I'm like, I know how I would feel. I'm putting myself in the shoes of what's going on. And I'm like, it's really not my highest fantasy to have like cum all over my face in that moment. You know, it might happen once or twice in life, but it's not my everyday preference, you know? And
wait a minute. You know one of my stories, right? From one of my ex-lovers. She used to request that. So some women like it.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. But I'm really curious here is, okay, what do you think is like the worst thing that guys can pick up from porn? Because they're watching it, like what's the mistake that guys are doing when they're watching porn thinking they're going to learn some good thing? Like what is it that they're not understanding, or the mistake that's in there for them to avoid?
Well, I think like if I'm gonna step back and look at it from a porn perspective, number one's gonna be angles, right? Because the angles that anatomically feel good don't show anything to the camera. Like people don't understand that, right? Like I'm completely torquing my hips open the entire time. I'm never having sex on a straight angle, ever. I'm always on a 45-degree angle because that is required for the camera. Pussy eating on porno is the worst, because, I mean, I get it, right? Like they want us to try and cheat our head way open and outstretch our like it's like nobody would eat pussy like that ever. Ever. Like, I mean, my jaw is killing me just trying to be like it's horrible. So, but again, it's for a visual context, right? Because, when I had my own production company, my camera crew would always be pissed off because I'm just eating pussy. I'm like, fuck it, no, I'm getting her off. So they don't see anything, and they're just like, come on. I'm like, no, fuck off. Like, I'd rather get the emotion out of her face and actually get something real, and then let's continue on, right? Because one of the main things that I always strive to achieve was to make her forget for that 45 minutes that anyone was in the room. So that's, because I used to always say, because I had people ask me like, well, okay, if you were to become one of the best porn actors in the world, what does it take? And it takes 5 things, right? So number 1, you have to be able to get a hard on in any situation at any time very fast in front of a whole bunch of strangers, right? Number 2, you should be able to produce a cum shot within a minute of being asked at any time. Number 3, you don't need to be hung like a horse, but you should be above average. Number 4, you should be decently good looking. That doesn't mean you need to be Brad Pitt, but if you if you look like a troll, you're never going to be a superstar, right? And then number 5 was the most important. You need to be able to extract something out of the woman that would not have taken place if you specifically were not in the scene with her.
This is so powerful because now we're starting to get into the dynamics of polarity. We're starting to get into the dynamics that, well, and it's something you talk about in your book too, and that's things we've talked on the show a lot, where yes, the woman is the one who's responsible to saying yes to the act happening, but then the man is the one leading the show. And working, having worked with thousands of clients by now, is one of the things that I do see is a lot of men don't understand that concept. And that's actually the most important thing I can teach a man is you have to fucking take the lead. Like, even if she's strong, even if she says she doesn't need it, she will want it. And if you do, you will take her to new levels of pleasure that she haven't even been to, and she doesn't know is even possible. And when you do that, that's how you digmatize her. That's how you get her to be like in love with you. It's not because you knew the triple digit tongue move or whatever fucking move things and it's really just about how you show up. And I would like for you to speak more about that mental aspect that it takes. And do you have any tips for the regular Joe, whoever is listening to our show today, to go from that place of like average, right? Or like, to that elite sexual skills that you're talking about that you can achieve? What would be their first steps?
Well, so this goes into exactly what you're talking about. And I've come across this with a lot of clients myself. And, there's an extreme amount of fear that they're dealing with. And I think a big part is Hollywood. I think a big part is television. It's the MTV generation, right? It's, they all have this idea, like, because you just look at society today and it's like, oh, toxic masculinity is bad, blah, 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 right? Over and over, men bad. That's basically, what it comes down to, men bad. And so these guys are thinking in their mind, well, okay, she says that she doesn't want XYZ, right? And what they don't realize is there's always been this disconnect. And, I really, really noticed it because we would talk about it when I was doing my NLP studies, and they had a great way of framing it. And it was, behavior is the highest form of information, which is so true, and that's where you end up with this, kind of paradox that happens, right? And I talk about it a lot, where it's like, well, you have this idea of consent, but real consent, especially in a sexual space, is implicit. It's hardly ever explicit, because the more explicit you make it, the less horny everybody suddenly becomes. Right? Like I knew of this one guy that he wanted to do a whole consent pledge and go on a date with someone, and before even going on the date, they need to sign this whole 3-page fucking form that says, well, if in case we decide to have sex at one point, blah 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 blah, that you say yes. I'm like, oh my God, I mean, your pussy's gonna dry up like a raisin.
Yes, I can attest. No, you're
right?
correct. You're correct.
So what guys need to understand just in the first place is that you really have to be paying attention to the woman, and you need to be paying attention to behavior, and in today's political climate, it's a little dicey, but it's reality, right? And everybody's like, well, no means no, blah blah blah. It's like, well, yes and no, because someone can say, oh, no, 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 but they just sit there and they're waiting for you to try again.
Oh, Céline plays this game with me all the time.
Oh yeah.
So, but in our case, the thing is that we've talked about this ahead of time, and so she's already told me that if she doesn't give me a really strong no, absolutely not, that I'm going to bed. If I don't get that kind of a reaction, if I get a no, not really, or nah, then I already know that there's a possibility there, and that I should pursue that. But that's because we've discussed that ahead of time. And this is, I think, one of the things, and this is actually a whole nother show and interview like topic, but this is one of the things that is so confusing for men, which is that we are being told in our society that yes means yes, no means no, maybe means no. That's what most people are being taught. And these guys are all afraid of being accused of, overstepping boundaries. And yet on the other end, the woman's not always that clear with her yes and her no. Now, is she?
Yeah, and the woman wants to see if you'll overstep a boundary that's a false boundary, right? Because if you're not willing to do it, then are you worthy? So there becomes a lot of different psychological pieces that sort of end up wrapped all together with that, right?
Yeah, maybe we'll have you back to do a whole nother episode just on that topic, because I know a lot of guys have this question where they go, how the fuck am I supposed to know what to do? That's a really common question. She says this, but then she does that. And then, and it's changing all the time. And I know a lot of guys get really frustrated with that. So I don't want to digress too much into that one, but
But so one of the things I'll say just to the guys out there is like, first, bolder is always better, because chances are you are being so timid that nothing's going to happen, and you are the one that is going to create the experience. Like, as a guy, it's your job. You are going to be the one that is creating the container, creating the entire experience, and the woman's going to flow into it like water, but you're going to be the bucket, as an analogy. So you have to, you got to lead. And if you're not, the polarity is just not going to be there. And polarity is so key, it's like the more you can be in your masculine, the more she can be in her feminine, or I've seen vice versa. That works too, right? But you need that polarity, because if you're just, buddies, then you're sitting on a couch watching Netflix and that's it. Nothing's happening.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
Absolutely. We've done multiple episodes on polarity. We've given public talks on it. We think it is one of the most important things that you should know, understand, and know how to work with in a relationship. And what amazes us all the time is how few people are out there really talking about it.
Oh yeah, polarity is key. Key. And the other thing that guys need to understand is, and I talk about it in my book, they have this idea in their mind that, sex with this girl, that girl, blah, 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 like it's going to be suddenly this panacea, like it's this whole magical thing. And then when I tell them, I say, no, they're all the fucking same. Like, you're the one that's making it a porn star level sex. Like, I kid you not, I have seen some women that are literal man eaters that, paired with the wrong guy, it's like watching a little pussy cat. And you're just like, God, is that the same woman? Because, it's like she's a Ferrari, but she's being driven by a janitor. Not Michael Schumacher. And you really get to see that, crystal clear, especially in my business. Like, I've really seen it where I'm just like, oh my God, that it's really, the man's, it's his job to create the sexual experience, to lead it forward, and to make the act happen.
Yeah, we have a friend, this woman, she's a multi six-figure earner, entrepreneur, like really doing amazing stuff in the world. And she's dating, and she's always finding these guys that aren't quite living up to her standards. So what we keep telling her is you've got to find a guy that's so much more alpha than you are.
100%.
And she kind of understands it, but she hasn't quite gotten there yet. But it's, when it's third party, it's so much easier to see, right? Like we look at her dynamic and we're like, oh, we know exactly what you need.
Well, yeah, because it can only go two ways. She has to either find some guy that's literally going to, like put her in her place completely, or she has to go the other route and decide, okay, I'm going to wear the pants, and then
Yeah.
find the most feminine guy, and that will work as well. Because I've seen that. We actually had a name for that in porno.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
yeah, not to digress, but it was kind of funny. Because there's this stereotypical, you'd say like suitcase pimp, right? Where it's like the guy's controlling the girl. But there's another type, and it's the baggage handler.
The baggage. I just learned something new. I've never heard that
Oh
before.
my God. No. Oh, I've seen it a couple times, and it's shock and awe, because I mean, you get this meek little guy, and I mean, literally, he is being yelled at by her. He is bringing her bags to set. She is literally like, hey, sit down there, shut up, wipe the cum off my face. But like, I mean, and he's just like, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Like, just, I mean, and it works, like you look at it from the outside and you say, well, that's strange. But I mean, she is so masculine. And the only reason it works is because he is so feminine, and they have a relationship, and it works.
Amazing. So we usually have a question we ask all of our guests and they all blush, but we know with you, we're not going to get you to blush.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question we ask everyone is, what is your best sexual talent?
Oh, pussy eating. Easy by far.
So it's interesting because Céline was reading your chapter on that in your book.
Uh-huh.
And so then over breakfast, I think it was breakfast, right?
Yeah. Yesterday we were talking about it.
So we were talking about what was written in the book. And she's like, did you know? And I'm over there going, what do you think I do to you every time? She's like, really? Really? I had no idea you were doing so much when you were down there.
and I say, full disclosure, I was like, I've only like gone down on a woman maybe like 5 times, so I'm not at all an expert, and that's why I was like, I need to really understand. And I was like trying to ask Kevin, and I was reading your book. I was like, oh, this technique, I remember, like you were doing something like this, so yes, if you want to know how to eat pussy like a pro, Erik has it down in his book. He also offers coaching and so much more. So why don't you tell our audience where they can find more of you?
Well, if they go to my website, www.erikeverhard.com, that's Erik with a K, they can find my book, and they can reach out to me about my professional one-on-one coaching services as well.
Awesome. And you are on Instagram, and your book title is Activate Your Superpower?
Yeah,
Sexual
the book
Superpower?
is Unleash Your Sexual Superpowers. It's available now in stores everywhere. So you guys can go pick it up on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, Chapters. It's out there.
It's actually really good.
It's good,
I have not fully read it, full disclosure. I'm still in it, but I'm going to finish it because I like it. And, having been working as a sex coach for like 9 years now, I've learned a lot of things in this arena. And it's very often I hear people giving very bad advice. And what I loved about Erik's book is that he is real, gives you good advice that actually will work in real life. It's not about a technique. It has more to do with just how you show up, your mental game. And yes, techniques can help, but it's not the only thing. So you'll get a lot of very valuable information in that book. So go get it and read it and then put it into action.
Yeah. You definitely have to, it's one thing to, absorb just knowledge, but at some point you need to put it into action and get out there and experiment.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we even skipped a whole bunch of questions here, but we are definitely out of time for this episode. So it was a fascinating conversation. Thanks, Erik, for coming on. And we will see everybody next week.
You betcha. Thank you very much.
We hope you like this episode of the Love Lab podcast. If you enjoy this show, subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends.
And for more free, exclusive content, join us in the Passion Vault at CelineRemy.com/vault. That's CelineRemy.com/vault.
Thanks for listening.
And remember, you're amazing.